Well, good evening to you and welcome to this program of Rodney Groudings. I'm your host, Leon Abrams, and today I have two very special gentlemen on the program, two commissioners of the Guyana Elections Commission. I have with me Brother Desmond Trotman, who is to my far left, and sitting in the middle here, Mr. Vincent, and we'll be talking about GECOM and a few other issues that may arise as the discussion progresses. Welcome to Walter Rodney Groudings, gentlemen.
Thank you,
Thank you
Dale.
very much.
Well, before we deal with the substantive issue of GECOM, the 7th of November, Sunday coming, is National Village Day. Vincent, would you like to give a background to the National Village Day and possibly the significance of that day to Guyanese in general?
Thank you very much, Dion, and good evening to our viewing public. Today we celebrate a significant day in the life of the nation called Guyana, and that day is National Villages Day. This day has its origin in the formation of the village movement, but in terms of the declaration and celebration, it goes back to 2013 when the then leader of the opposition, David Arthur Granger, retired brigadier, moved a motion in Parliament calling for the day to be commemorated because of the significance of the moment. That is the moment of the acquisition of plantations by the emmanuated people of African descent and the establishment of villages, which could be seen as one of the building blocks of the nation called Guyana. The village being an institution in its own right, and an institution that embraced, at that time, all of the population except for the people, the indigenous peoples, and the Europeans who were in the plantations. So basically, Guyana, in terms of its population, in 1838, 1839, was in villages. And it's argued that all of us who are descendants of those people are in one way or the other connected to some village. And I'm quite sure if I asked, well, Dion lives in the village, I can tell you which village I think I'm connected to. And I'm quite sure Brother TROTMAN will be able to do the same. And any Guyanese who takes interest in heritage will be able to do that. But that motion having been passed in the Parliament in 2013 and sent to His Excellency, the then President, Donald Ramotar, for assent, never assented to the bill. So here is a president who is a frequent writer about democracy and governance, who did not do what the Constitution required of him, and that is to assent to the bill, and or, if not, to send the bill back to Parliament indicating reasons why he would not have assented. None was done. Just ignored a decision, a bill which was approved by the National Assembly. However, as things would be, the opposition leader came to office in 2015 and in 2016 made a declaration of National Villages Day. And so as of 2017, this day has been officially on our calendar. Today we celebrate it. I am still to hear of the present regime giving any recognition to this day, which is on our calendar. But that notwithstanding, we celebrate it. We celebrate it because National Villages Day, is an important day in commemoration of the evolution of the place, the nation called Guyana. Not only is National Village Day something signifying the purchase of villages by people of African descent, but it signifies also the establishment of villages by the indentured peoples, the Chinese, and the Indo-Guyanese. So it is something that is all-embracing, and it's something that, if commemorated, could help in that mending of the gap between our ethnic groups. And not only were villages established by people of African descent, by people of Indian descent, by people of Chinese descent, but there were instances, and Victoria depicted this, where people of Indian descent were able to come and be welcomed in the villages. And this is very evident in Buxton. We even have in Buxton a street named after an Indo-Guyanese. Though everybody would associate Buxton with people of African descent.
Yeah, but we had Portuguese, we had Chinese.
They were welcomed
Mapao.
into the
Of
bosom
Chinese people who were there.
of those villages. So the village movement is not just about people of African descent, it's about Guyana and Guyana's evolution. And it's about Guyana's struggle for sustainable development. Because when the villages were established, they were established on one hand as homesteads, to provide for homesteads. They also were established to provide for the economic activity of farming and the services, rendering of services, including things like religious opportunities, recreational opportunities, things communal. In fact, the villages are the basis upon which we eventually call the republic the cooperative republic, because the villages were seen as a cooperative venture even before cooperativism had been internationally established. So, brothers and sisters out there, today we celebrate National Villages Day, a day that is important in the evolution of this country in which we live. A day that still recognizes that the majority of our people are still living in villages. And much of our life, national life, is still associated with villages, having been built on the foundation of villages.
One of the things that a lot of people don't know, that even places in Georgetown.
Oh yes, yes, certainly. You know, it tells you how much villages impacted. In fact, all of Guyana, particularly all of the coastal belt, was divided on plantations. They weren't always urban areas. You had all plantations in Georgetown. The Penitents and all these places were plantations. And more specifically, up to the 70s, Kitty and Lodge were still villages with their village councils. We really have a foundation built on villages.
Yeah. But what has Ipadaji, wearing the hat of Ipadaji, how have you looked at the day and...
We are going to be commemorating the day. Ipadaji is commemorating the day. Those commemorations started before today. But even as we speak here now, we are on the verge of a depiction which was done in 2019 at Victoria, when they celebrated the 180th anniversary. There was a depiction, and that depiction will be rebroadcast today with a prelude explaining what's International Village Day. That will be broadcast on this said television stream on Facebook. That happens today as well. Even as we sit here now in this program, the people in Victoria are having an activity. Including that activity will be a rereading of the proclamation of the abolition of slavery, and the reading of a message that was delivered by UC Guyana in relation to National Villages Day. So that's taken place. Those of you who are readers of the newspapers would have been able in Village Voice today and in Kaichur to access an article which is commemorative of National Village Day as well. And we have been able to mount a banner in Victoria to mark this day so that people traversing the East Coast can come upon that banner and be remembered that villages were established, villages are existing, villages are important. So that, yes, we are commemorating National Village Day from the standpoint of the International Decade of People of African Descent, the Assembly of Guyana. And we hope that this commemoration will give more emphasis to what we have called for, which was a petition coming out of the General Assembly of IPADG, and that is for the re-establishment of village councils, because we think that there are things that are peculiarly village things, and the villages should have their own government structure to administer those things which are specific to villages. So today also gives us an opportunity to regain momentum in the call for village councils, as is provided for in our constitution.
One thing before we move on to the GECOM and so on, President Ramatar did not assent to the bill, and he gave no reasons for not assenting. Just ignored it, which is unconstitutional. But what, I don't know, what can you presume would have led to such an act? Something that was it seen as something that is only focused on one set of people, or did they possibly think that it's going to give leverage?
First of all, that bill would have come from opposition benches. It is not usual in Guyana for the opposition to be successful in piloting bills and things like that, but it happened because of the 2011 election results that provided for an opposition majority. There has been a saying by someone who now sits in the seat of Speaker that the government gets its way, the opposition only gets its say. And so in some regards, Ramatar was embracing that. You're in opposition, you have your say, but that's not the way it's going to happen. So I think that's a part of the problem, the culture of not including the opposition in the real decision-making process. And to have assented to that bill would have been given recognition to the role and the influence of the opposition. It tells you what's happening today, Or Fernali says, I'm not talking to Granger unless he recognizes me. And it shows that they have this recognition as a critical thing, which they themselves dealt with in a particular way. And so it was a non-recognition in the sense of the opposition by not assenting to the bill and not giving reason for not assenting to the bill. It may also be a disposition towards recognition of the importance of villages and the role that people of African descent has played in the evolution of Guyana. There are some of those people who have said that, African Guyanese made no contribution. They have said that. And to recognize Village Day is to recognize a significant and probably one of the most momentous contributions ever made to the development of Guyana. So it's a reflection of the partisan, exclusionary politics and the polarization of the Guyanese society.
I concur with that view, but the facts are clear and they cannot be hidden. And I'm hopeful that the day will, over a period of time, that the celebrations are going to move from village to village so that people begin to recognize the contribution of the village movement.
In some regards, that movement has started. If I'm not mistaken, I think the people of Mokake this year will also be doing something for National Villages Day. And so I'll probably join with you to reach out to all those villages to say, look, do your thing in your village. Do your thing in your village. It's a day when we can talk about the Chinese in Windsor Forest. It's a day when we can talk about the African Guyanese in the numerous villages. And when we can talk about the Indo-Guyanese in their villages. And you all should be doing your thing. There's a historic moment that have brought all of us to where we are in terms of the extant villages across the coast.
All right, Brother Alexander, thank you very much for that
Beautiful presentation.
exhortation.
Yeah.
Can't say the presentation. Now, Brother Trotman, what's happening at GECOM?
A lot is happening. A lot is happening at GECOM. And we really can't speak to the issues that are affecting GECOM and the nation at one single session. We need to do this more often. But I think at this particular point in time, at GECOM we are very concerned with establishing a secretariat, which we're hoping will have the confidence of all of the people in the nation. And at this particular point in time, while the preliminary work is still taking place, to go in that direction, if I'm asked to venture an opinion at this juncture on how it will eventuate, I will say that I have very little confidence that the kind of secretariat that I would hope will come into being will come into being. As we go forward, we can probably continue to look at some of those issues. But at this juncture, that is my particular gut feeling, and I am very concerned as a person who has heard so many negative things about GECOM over time, and who can also point some fingers, because as you know, I've been in this elections process for years, not only from the time I became commissioner, but long before then. And so that I myself can maybe point some fingers at some of the things that took place in GECOM that really weren't in the nation's best interest. But I think that we're at a particular point in time now where we have an opportunity to put in place mechanisms that will give recognition to what is it people want to see happen. And as I said, I don't believe that at this juncture that we are moving in that direction.
So, Vincent, what is your view? Is it in sync with what Brother Trotman is?
No, Brother Trotman has detailed some things. He started off by saying much is happening. I think there's a dichotomy in that regard. There's a song that says boots and more boots. I think it's out of Barbados. I think that song describes what's happening in GECOM, boots and more boots. We came out of the elections and started to have discussions about local government elections, with the CEO giving some guidance. That suddenly came to a halt with absolutely no explanation as to why we halted our preparatory work and went into a process of getting rid of the officers. I then said publicly that GECOM was comatose. We were not doing anything in relation to our mandate, and local government elections were coming up. I predicted then that we were going to run into problems with our deadlines, notwithstanding Commissioner Gonrad's publicly saying, well, we'll get it done. Well, I think I've been vindicated. We're in November, and we are exactly where Lowenfield left us. Not because he left us there, but because we did not take the process forward. What we did was to stop boots and more boots, trampling the same ground. We got rid of Lowenfield, got rid of Myers, got rid of Mingo, and then sought to move into a process of recruitment. And that has been itself another boots, relatively slow process, and with all sorts of funny things on the horizon in terms of the persons who would have applied. And again, I make the point, not doing things that GECOM should be doing. So, for example, the BV Triumph Council months ago wrote to us asking us to fill vacancies. These vacancies are not for councillors in constituencies, so we don't have the problem of by-election. Simply a process of approving of the names that have been submitted. And there came some letter asking whether Lowenfield was authorized to do what he did. But what Lowenfield did was in keeping with due process in the GECOM. The people wrote to Lowenfield. By then he was on leave, but as has been the practice, since it's the function of the CEO, he responded. There's absolutely no questions about the process and its validity and legitimacy. But we have spent months now discussing whether Lowenfield is authorized or not authorized. We seem incapable of making decisions, but I wouldn't think that it's a point of being incapable. Some people don't want the decision to be made. And whilst we're not making the decisions, people who complain that GECOM spent 5 months to install the current regime are stymieing councillors from taking up their seats when there's no good reason. So we as Jupiters. Here we talk about 5 months. The 5 months has not affected the term of government. They get back the 5 months. But the term of these people is being affected by us not approving them to occupy their seats. And so the work is going on in BV Triumph. And these people are not there to represent the people who voted for them because of GECOM's lethargy and more than lethargy, irresponsible behavior of not resolving a matter that is straightforward. So, yes, much is happening, but much of what is happening is boots and more boots. Heavy boots on the feet of soldiers who are marking time, trampling the ground. So that's what's happening. The ground is being trampled. But the outcome of the trampling is just taking GECOM backward, as if one is creating a dent in the soil rather than turning the soil over to plant seeds and have production.
But people who have lost their ID cards and who are applying for new ID cards, they are stymied also because lots of people have been saying that in the absence of the CEO, there is nobody to sign.
That is the fact. That's why I'm saying we're trampling the ground. Because in the absence of the CEO and the DCEO, then even the routine exercise of replacement ID cards has come to a halt. So GECOM has come to a junction where the red lights are stuck. And we're not moving forward.
So we can conclude that there will be no local government elections this year as is mandated by law.
I would say yes, because all of the things required for an election have deadlines and datelines, and there's no way in the present circumstances, in my considered opinion, that even if we said tomorrow we'll be recommencing the process, that we can meet those deadlines in time for the election, late November, early December. No way.
The primary concern, and you alluded to it, is recruitment to fill the vacancies of the persons whom the PPP was able to get rid of. I mean, they threatened that they would, and they did everything in their powers to ensure that that happened. And the decision to have them removed, we saw the chairwoman of GECOM also taking the line of the PPP. And I don't get a sense now that the chairwoman is willing in any sense to go against any decision despite how outlandish it is. That she is of the mind to vote outside the line of the PPP commissioners. And so the general impression now is that GECOM has 4 commissioners to 3. I don't want to throw you in.
No, I personally am not going to be prejudicial,
Right.
and so I would not make a statement that the chairperson is aligned to the PPP.
Yeah.
But the
Yeah.
data shows to date that on almost every
Every
issue
occasion,
she's voted with them. So you can make the judgment. I'm not being prejudicial. I pray to God that we have a chairperson who is not aligned. So I'm not going to be prejudicial, but the data does show, and this is not me speaking, it's the data, that on most issues she has in fact come down on the side of the 3 PUP commissioners.
Brother Trotman, there are some concerns about this list that came to the fore about well, first of all, the recruitment process, the conditions for recruitment that were put out to the public for applications for these positions that were out there. People are concerned about what the requirements are for filling the positions, and the impression is that these were designed to basically exclude potential candidates and to facilitate the return of some nefarious individuals in GECOM. How has the commission come up with those criteria for selection?
Okay, and in fairness to the commission, and here it is that I want to say that Commissioner Alexander was not present when those discussions began in earnest. He was incapacitated, and so really wasn't part of those discussions. But when at those discussions, it was clear that there were some intense discussions, and that there were different proposals. Let's take, for instance, the position of the chief election officer. One of the conditions, one of the things that they're asking for is that the person must have at least 10 years experience in managing the elections. I can say this, that commissioners, that was the position advanced by Commissioner Shadi, Gunraj, and Manoj Narayan, and supported by the chair. Commissioner Corbin and myself, we felt that the demand for 10 years management experience will exclude
Management experience.
management experience.
Not management experience per se.
No, of the management experience in
Electoral.
election.
In elections.
Yeah.
That'd be done.
We felt that will exclude certain persons. And personally, I myself thought that the 10 years requirement, I didn't say that at the meeting. I really thought that the 10 years requirement that was being imposed was intended to allow for the return of one of those persons who you said had committed serious breaches in the electoral laws. I personally feel so. And so that, but there were, as I said, in fairness to the commissioners, that there were intense discussions and proposals and counter proposals with them. So that what we have at this particular point in time are applicants who, to my mind, don't necessarily fill all of the requirements that we're asking for, not only for the CEO's position, but for other positions. But the commission will at some point in time sit down as a body and look at those at what has come forward from the applicants, and we will make a decision one way or the other. But I want to be very clear that in relation to the CEO's position, there's going to be intense discussions. as there will be also on the other for the other positions, but there will be intense discussions because we have before us um, concerns about persons who have applied to the position.
But in light of what has been happening in GECOM, and in light of the evidence, as Vincent said, how productive will those intense discussions be in terms of the outcome?
Well, Vincent, you want to go to address that one?
I think what is, if one does public administration, there is reference in public administration to what you call the external environment, which can impact the internal environment. I think GECOM is at the point where on this particular matter, the conscience of the nation would have to be a factor in the operation of GECOM. And but unfortunately, we're in a nation which seems to be unconscionable. And I say that because when one looks at the applicants, it's hard to believe that persons, plural persons, who have significant outstanding matters before the courts feel that they have a right to a job at GECOM. Is unbelievable. It's unbelievable that these persons are so bold-faced. And persons, I'm not talking about the one person that the nation knows about. I'm talking about persons at large. So I'm talking about the state of conscience of this nation. That these persons can come forward. What has not been publicly disclosed is that at our last meeting, there was an unsigned document purporting to come from one Mr. Goko Bulu, suggesting that he is withdrawing. Now, we have to verify that, in fact, the document originated from him. But it is a matter of fact that there was a mail, an email, unsigned, purporting to be that of Mr. Bulu, that said, look, I am withdrawing. So that really it's not clear what we're moving into. It's not clear. We have already spent, I think, about 1 month since we got the applications. We had a holiday that intervened. We had 1 week where we couldn't meet because of connectivity problems. I don't know if these are acts of divine intervention, but we have not been able to start to deal with the process of examining those names and shortlisting. This week, we couldn't do it because we had some administrative snafus in terms of the documentation. And so we really haven't started looking. We are, by agenda item, supposed to discuss how we deal with shortlisting and how we deal with the interviews. But we have not really discussed those matters as yet. It's not, like I said earlier, trampling the ground. 1 month to be trampling the ground. And we haven't really discussed those matters. Sometimes one gets the impression that we're looking over our shoulders to see who's going to say what next before we act. And that's a part of the external environment to which I am referring. But I think that more and more we have to let the public know what is the state of affairs in GECOM. And more, I think a public outcry will have to be an element of what influences what decisions we make in GECOM. Not that the public is going to tell us what to do, but we need to have a national conscience to which we buy in, and then we exercise our authority to make decisions.
Now, Anil and Malal is on record as stating that they are going to be willing to enact laws to deal with people who have committed crimes in GECOM, and to the extent that we had proposed even going to the Yalus. We got that impression that that was what he was saying. And how does that align with a person like Gokul Guru and the other guy, IT guy, who was involved in questionable activities during the fund and all of these things? How do these things factor in to their application for positions in GECOM?
Well, I do not see that an organization having taken a decision not to reemploy someone a few years ago, someone against whom there is irrefutable evidence. You know, I hear every day people talking about an error and a correction. Right? But do they make any error? And we got to stop this nonsense of talk about an error and a correction. There was no error. Boudou defended what he did. When he was challenged, he said he had made no mistake and he knew what he was doing and he had done the right thing. It is only after we reverted to the law, clause by clause, and proved that he had not done the right thing, that the correction was done. We didn't volunteer a correction of an error. We directed the correction of what had been done. And what had been done, for me, is tantamount to an attempted fraud. So when you talk about the law that Anil Nandaland is talking about, if Nandalal is serious and committed to the rule of law, acts of attempted fraud, there's no, it's not statute bar. So let's start from there. And if we start from there, then we can go back, way back to 1992, and identify officials of GECOM who can be called to board for what they would have done from 92 up to whenever. So that's why I said you have a problem of conscience. You're talking here about laws that you want to bring in, and you have, you know, people you want to have charge and all of that. But we have had over a decade people who have clearly breached the law and
In favor of the PPP.
in favor of the PPP, and made public statements that the people made an error and there were corrections and the system has worked. And I tell people, if you tell me in 2011 when we were able to identify the attempted fraud and the system worked, well, in 2020, we identified the attempted fraud and the system worked. Hence, the government has been installed. Let's have the same standards for everyone. But clearly, people are driven by interests, and morality and legality is not a factor when they're being driven by interests. And that's the problem we are faced with. That's the problem we are faced with.
Dion, I wanted to go back to the force, to the earlier point that I made when I said that we want to see installed a secretariat that people have confidence in. You know, Vincent has alluded to it. We have heard on several occasions allegations being made about persons against whom up to now no proof, nothing has been proven against them. But we've heard about them doing things which conflicted with the law. That is what we've done. So, then some of those persons are in court. The matters cannot be heard up to now, cannot be disposed of, simply because there's problems, as far as I understand, with producing the evidence. But anyhow, what is clear is that GECOM, not only last year, but before then, was stigmatized in relation to these allegations. But it serves people's purpose not to address them early. But here is it. We're going into a situation where we are about to identify what we believe, what we hope will be competent persons to take charge of the secretariat. And we want to do it on the same basis in which it is we were told over time that we were doing it, and that is that we use in our political influence in order to ensure that persons emerge for a particular reason. And so that when we had these preliminary discussions on how it is we're going to go forward with identifying the new secretariat officials, I made a proposal, supported by Vincent and Charles, that what we need to do is to identify, the term I used was eminent persons, who will sit, examine the persons, and make recommendations to the commission on who should be appointed. The commission, with that proposal, the commission will have the final say in who would be appointed. But the response to that was no. I'm not prepared to abrogate my responsibilities, my rights as a commissioner to interview those persons. Now, if it is that we go in that direction, there's a real possibility that persons who will not necessarily enjoy the confidence of the public at large will be identified for those positions. Now, if you go the other way, there's a real possibility that coming out of that process, there will be some degree of confidence, a large degree of confidence in those persons. My gut feeling at this particular point in time is that we may very well be going in the direction where the commissioners, who will have their own preferences based not necessarily on the knowledge of these people's experience, but because of where the people, who the people are and where they come from, what is their political affiliation. And you will have a situation where the secretariat is again reflective of what they say it has been over time, and that is, persons who are aligned politically with one or the other of the larger political parties. We really at this juncture cannot afford to go in that direction if it is that we really want to have GECOM respected. People have confidence in GECOM. We cannot go in that direction. But as I said, my gut feeling is that there's a real likelihood that that is where we're going to go. But the dire consequences that will, flow from that, from those kinds of actions.
I mean, this question might be unfair to you as a commissioner, but do you get a sense that there is an attempt by the PPP to commandeer GECOM?
That's an understatement. There's an attempt to commandeer everything.
Everything.
Including GECOM.
Including GECOM.
And I want to speak to the proposition that my colleague made. The proposition has good reason. We know that in the past, when commissioners were the interviewers, there's an interview sheet and you have to put scores. And that those scores are not necessarily a reflection of the performance of the interviewee. We know of instances where persons were scored 100%, almost inconceivable. And therefore, that system is easily manipulated. We know where the commissioners sit. We know where they sit. They are commissioners who have made it clear that they represent a party interest. There are people who have said that all of us represent a party interest. All of us represent a party interest. We are saying, look, given that disposition towards GECOM and its commissioners, if GECOM is serious about putting in place a machinery that is not biased and partisan, let us allow a team of professionals, experts in the area of human relations, to conduct the interviews. And the idea is that they should not be coming there biased. They come in there and they will do the objective scoring that we don't do. And then send to us the recommendations based on the process. So at the end of the day, GECOM retains the responsibility. So this nonsense that's being said that people giving up their response, that's nonsense. We are simply delegating a function, and delegation always means that you retain ultimate responsibility, so you're not giving up anything. But here, not only are we retaining ultimate responsibility through delegation, but we will still be the ones who receive those recommendations and make the final decisions. And people are objecting to that. People can only object to that if they have reason why they want to be involved in the process to realize their own objectives. So, again, in my view, there is a need for national conscience to speak in this matter, right? And it's not speaking in my favor if they claim that we are partisan. And we are saying, all right, we prepare to step back and let a non-partisan set of people do this job. What's the problem with the others stepping back? Why is it they're so insistent on being directly involved in the recruitment process when everybody has said that the process is corrupted because the commissioners come to the fore from a political perspective, and that in fact GECOM needs to change the whole idea of the way commissioners are appointed. So whilst they're waiting to change that, we are saying, all right, here is an opportunity for one of our processes not to be tainted by our presence, because our presence is considered in a particular way. Let us get professionals to help us. And they're objecting.
So, in light of all these things, GECOM had said that they're going to be throwing out the call for applications to people who are outside of Guyana. Have you received any?
We have received a few.
Okay.
We have received a few.
And how do they fit into this 10-year?
I wouldn't want specifically to comment on that because it's a part of process that we look at those applications, and I wouldn't want to be out there with any disclosure about people's names and
No, I wasn't asking for names.
whether they have the years or so. I would leave that to the process which is to unfold. I would prefer not to make those comments at this
So
time.
you did get applications?
But we do have applications of persons who are not Guyanese and who do not reside in Guyana.
That's an interesting fact. And
But I believe, Dion, even though we've had a few applications from persons outside of Guyana, there was a possibility that you would have had more if it is that they had given the persons who had an interest in applying enough time in order to make up their minds. One of the things that we have a problem with on the commission was the time factor in relation to when these ads will be publicized. We had not firmly committed on a period, but the nearest that we had come to a committal to a period came out of a proposal which I made, which said that these things should be aired for 1 month. And in fact, if you check the minutes of the of GECOM's meeting, that is what stands out. Anyhow, without being informed prior to the ads being aired, being publicized, I was convinced that we were talking about a 1 year, a 1 month period, until I saw that the thing was reduced to 2 weeks. The time period was reduced to 2 weeks. And I do believe that if it is that you want to have persons from abroad who may have, some of them who may have the necessary requisite skills and the qualifications, that they needed enough time to be able to view the ads, right? And I don't think that was done. And so what you have, even though we're told that there are 490 applications, some of them are duplicated. But I do believe that we would have had more applications if there was if the time frame was extended, was allowed to run for a month. But anyhow, that's where we are. But there are some other problems, which I believe that we're coming close to the end of time with the program.
We got about 10 minutes.
Okay, there's some other things at GECOM which it is that the public should know about. There's a real possibility that some of GECOM offices will be closed.
Offices?
Yes.
Okay.
Simply because the landlords, because we rent offices from a number of persons, and in those instances where offices have been rented from landlords, those persons have not been paid for the year.
For the year?
Yeah. And they have not been paid for the year, even though the commission recommended that payments go forward. But NPTAB, that is this body which is now supposed to be looking after procurement, etc., impose a condition that all of those landlords who have rented properties to GECOM for years should now reapply to be approved.
I'm trying to understand. You are in possession of the people's buildings.
Right.
You are using the buildings.
Yeah.
There's a contract in place because you're
No, the contract is not in place. The
the
contracts
contract
have
is-
expired.
Yeah.
expired.
And what is the practice is that the commission would approve the renewal of the contracts when they expire.
When they expire.
That has been the practice
Yeah. Over
the
time.
years. That practice became even more pertinent when GECOM was removed from under the control of the Ministry of Finance by virtue of the previous government's legislation in relation to constitutional bodies. We know that was reversed. We also know that the court has since ruled that the reversal was incorrect. But what has happened is that the Ministry of Finance, NPTAB, has stepped in to see that now these contracts have expired, and we have gone through a normal process of approving an extension of the contracts, that we should be retendering for contractors for buildings, retendering. And if we don't retender, then they have not released the money. The money is allocated in our budget. But NPTAB has to sign off on the release, and they have not signed off on the contention that we must go and advertise for all of these buildings. And after that, we know who are the contractors, and there probably be new contractors. Our contention being, look, we have been in these buildings, some of them for decades, right? The nature of the operation of GECOM. You can't be advertising every year and changing the
Changing the location of the office.
There's
It's ridiculous.
peculiarities of our operation, right? And things have come to a head where there's no movement. And these contractors are writing us and saying, well, look, almost a year is gone and you haven't paid your bills. So that there's an issue of the work of GECOM being threatened by actions of the executive.
Landlords, some landlords have actually served GECOM with notices to remove from the premises. You know, the public has grown accustomed to the location of these offices, and you know, I see nothing untoward in relation to GECOM and the existing landlords agreeing on you know, continued occupation of the buildings. But you have a situation here now where all of the offices that are rented,
How many of these are in?
quite a few are rented, and the public at large you know, is aware of the location of these offices, and the possibility exists that some of those offices, if it is that if people go through with the process of retendering, and that some of those offices will be removed, and with tremendous negative impact on the work of GECOM. So that but I said that there are lots of things that are happening. There are lots of things that are happening for which, even though GECOM have pleaded for resolutions that, you know, people continue to ignore
I'm a bit, you know, because the fight for GECOM and autonomy to make decisions went all the way to the CCJ and all of these things. So how is it now that this very executive that was installed because of that fight are imposing a position on GECOM that...
Dion, I said earlier, we are faced with duplicity. We are not guided by principles. We are guided by interests.
Yeah.
That's what we're guided by, interests. So that is what's affecting us. As an autonomous agency, you know, GECOM has a commission, which is its government, so to speak. It should be allowed the freedom to make certain decisions, but we see here the incursion of the executive in the decision-making process. I don't know how the recent ruling
Of the court.
of the court has impacted a pullback on this matter. I don't know how that's affected, because the court has ruled, in fact, that the legislation passed by the current regime
is illegal.
is illegal. So it's duplicity. That's what it's duplicity and interest that's driving what happens to a large extent in this country. You know, and it comes from the highest level. The president was confronted about the question of not talking to the leader of the opposition. He started off by saying he's going to observe all of the constitutional requirements. Started off by saying that. But that's a blanket statement. When it came to the specific question of talking to the leader of the opposition, he said that the leader of the opposition is duplicitous, because he's saying that this government is installed, but still he wants to talk to us. So he never answered the question about talking to the man. And when they pressed the issue, he went back and said, I said I will observe all the constitutional provisions. He has not given a public
definitive
undertaking to speak to the man, nor has he acted in a manner that initiates talking to the man. So from the very top of the system, we have these problems. So, you know, the middle management and all of that, there's the example. Here's how business is conducted in Guyana. Our fruit is rotten from the very top, from the head.
But in light of the court's decision, is GECOM going to write the Ministry of Finance saying that...
Let me say one thing to you. Notwithstanding all I've said about GECOM being comatose, stamping the ground and all of that, this is one issue on which GECOM has held one head.
Okay.
This is one issue
Yeah.
on which everybody in GECOM, the chairman, the so-called PPP commissioners, the so-called APNU commissioners, they've all held one head on this matter. That there is absolutely no basis on which NPTAB should be withholding these contracts from the renewal, and they should allow us to get on with our business. One head. I don't know if we're brave enough to go to court, but we're holding one head administratively.
Well, that's encouraging. that's encouraging. But I'm hopeful, because people are concerned about GECOM and the way it is. The obvious view that many people have is that in light of the revelation of voodoo and all of that, and you said it's an attempt at commandeering the entire country. We see that all in every facet of life, the laws that are being passed, and we ought to, I don't know, Nandalal is saying that the proposed changes to the legislation and so on will be sent out to, I don't know who dictated these changes, and so that these will be sent out
To discussion.
to discussion and so on. So they're on a roll, and like you said, the public will have to intervene in order to put a stop to it. And I'm hopeful that that intervention is going to be loud and very forceful. I don't know. I mean, but they're doing the IRI and all of that, involvement in this proposed change, if they are involved, whatever. And so, but I don't know if the time permits for you to come back so that we can look at some of these issues and maybe let the public continue to be made aware of developments in GECOM, because it's in our national interest.
Yeah, I believe, Dion, that as far as possible, the public is entitled to have a sense of what is happening in GECOM. But once they're apprised of what is happening, they shouldn't just sit on that information, because it's important that the kind of meaningful changes that you want to have really will only come about if there's some kind of upsurge of demand, And so that I do believe that, and I will hold myself, make myself available from time to time to come on the program and to speak to the issues that are taking place in GECOM. But as I said, that I don't want it to appear as if it is that I'm just going through a fruitless exercise, because from where I sit, I do believe that the kind of changes that are required will only eventuate if it is that there is support for some of the positions, that we will take it from there.
Any last comments, Vincent?
Well, GECOM, what's happening in GECOM in some regards is a reflection of what's happening in the country. There is a crisis in terms of governance, and therefore this is a matter that the nation needs to attend to. It's not a matter that can be done looked at in a closet. And so we have to be committed to a certain level of openness so that the public can know, the political parties can know, civil society can know. And it is then for the nation at large to take a position that drives us in a particular direction.
Okay, gentlemen, I want to thank you for being on this program this evening, and I want to thank the viewers out there for being part of this program. And I'm hopeful that somehow, some way, that the situation at GECOM can be resolved, and that we have a commission that is really going to serve the nation in its best interest. I do look forward to us being here next week, same time, same channel, for another program called Rodney Groudings. I'll see you.
2 hours to finish this article. So
Yeah.
we'll get straight to it.
Yeah. So you're heading home?